lesson 7. We are skipping lesson 5 and 6, and we are jumping straight to 7. You're ready for it. Today we're going to be drawing lines on a grid and coming up with rules for those lines, which doesn't make any sense right now. So you'll have to keep watching and figure out how to do that. Like I said, today we are doing lesson 7. We are looking at a list of x coordinates and a list of y coordinates, and we're going to plot those on the grid, and you'll see how that works. So first, we need to complete the table. As you'll see, they have parentheses with the x value, comma, the y value, which we learned that's how you write a coordinate pair yesterday. So I'm going to go ahead and use my x and y and fill in my table. For my first coordinate pair, the x value is 2, which I see right here, and the y value is 0, so I just put a comma 0. So we're basically taking the same information that we see here and putting it into the format of a coordinate pair. I'm going to go ahead and do that for the rest. Now that I have all of my points, I'm going to go ahead and put those points on the grid. So as you can see here, my first coordinate pair is 2, 0, which means I'm going to find 2 on the x-axis and 0 on the y-axis, so my first point goes right here. My next point, as you can see, is 3.5, 1.5. So I'm going to go on the x-axis and find 3.5. I don't see 3.5. I see 3 and I see 4, so it must be here. Halfway in between 3 and 4 is 3 and 1/2. So 3.5 on the x-axis, and then I need to find 1.5 on the y. So I'm going to go up to 1, and here's 1.5. So my next point would go right here. Next I have 4.5, 2.5, so go over to 4.5 on the x, up to 2.5 on the y. And finally I have 6, 4, so I'm going to go 6 on the x-axis and 4 up on the y-axis. So I've plotted the points on the coordinate plane. Now I'm supposed to use a straight edge to draw a line connecting these points. I'm just going to go ahead and draw it as straight as I can. If you have paper, you can draw it with a straight edge. It's hard to do and explain everything. I'll try my best. It's not too bad. That's pretty straight. So I have done that. Check. Now the next thing it says is write a rule showing the relationship between the x and y coordinate points on this line. What? What does that even mean? What they're asking is, how did they get from 2 to 0? How did they get from 3.5 to 1.5? How did they get from 4.5 to 2.5? How did they get from 6 to 4? Does anybody see the pattern? I'll go ahead and write it in here, but if you want a second to try to figure it out on your own, you could pause here. So the pattern I see is if I take 2 and I subtract 2, I get 0. Now that doesn't mean that it's the rule. I have to make sure that this operation works for every single coordinate pair. So I'm going to keep going and see if it works. If I do 3.5 minus 2, that answer should be 1.5, so that's right. If I do 4.5 minus 2, I'm going to get 2.5, so that's right. If I do 6 minus 2, I'm going to get to 4. So as you can see, minus 2 works for every single one, so we know that's the rule. Now, it doesn't always have to be subtraction. Sometimes it's addition, sometimes it's multiplication, sometimes it's division, sometimes it's a combination. For this one, it's pretty simple. We're just subtracting 2, so the rule is going to look like this. For every x coordinate, I'm going to subtract 2, and that will equal the y coordinate. Do you see how that makes sense? Take your x coordinate, so for example, this is 2, then subtract 2, 2 minus 2 equals your y coordinate, which is 0. The final question on here says, name 2 other points that are also on the line, and it gives you kind of 2 lines to put them on here. So here's where you have to be careful. You can't go to any random point unless it's for sure perfectly on 2 of these grid lines crossing. So with this graph, it's pretty easy, but because they cross at a lot of different points, but sometimes you're going to have a line that looks maybe like this. See where it only crosses perfectly at certain spots, whereas like these spots, it's really hard to tell. If it's asking for 2 extra points on the line, make sure you're finding points that are exactly lining up. And that way you'll know that you have the correct answer. So these are the 2 points that I have chosen. I'm going to figure out what their coordinates are. So this one, remember, we always do the x first. So this one's 3 on the x, and then if I go up, it's 1 on the y. So my coordinate pair would be 3, 1. And then if I go ahead and find this point, it is 4 on the x and 2 on the y. So I have 4, 2. And if you think back to our rule of x minus 2 equals y, well, we can see here that 3 minus 2 equals 1, which is our y. 4 minus 2 equals 2, which is our y. So our rule does work. So today you're just going to be working with some coordinate grids. You're going to be plotting some points, trying to figure out the rules, and naming some more points on the lines. It is a big step up, but I think you guys are ready for it. If you get stuck on the rule part, shoot me an email and I can just give you the answer over email, or if you want to get on a Zoom call, we can figure it out together. I mean, a WebEx call. But sometimes this is where kids get stuck. So if you're stuck, don't sit there and be stuck forever. Just let me know and I'd be happy to help you out. For your problem set today, you're solving all of 1 and 2. Number 3, solve only A, D, and F, and then your exit ticket is pretty simple, and you can go ahead and upload that to Seesaw.